It's time to talk about June's Journey, a hidden object mystery game with a captivating detective story. When you're playing, you solve a mind-teasing mystery of the roaring 1920s while you dive into June's captivating quest to uncover a scandalous family secret and solve her sister's murder. It's mystery, it's danger, and it's romance, and you never know where the next chapter's gonna take you. If that wasn't fun enough, you get to customize your very own luxurious island estate. Seriously, I cannot stop playing. I am already on the 3rd chapter, and I just started recently. Join me back in time in the glamorous 1920s. June needs your help, detective. Download June's Journey for free today on iOS and Android.
Patrons heard this episode first. If you'd like to join our Patreon, visit the link in our show notes or go to patreon.com/themurderdiariespod. Another fun perk patrons get is a shout out in an episode. Speaking of, thanks so much, Fidelity and Louise.
Welcome back to another episode of The Murder Diaries. Picture this. You just graduated from high school, and you're fortunate enough to be able to go on a graduation trip to Aruba with more than 100 of your classmates and friends. There are 7 adult chaperones. It's likely the first big trip without your parents and your first taste of the kind of freedom where you can make your own decisions about what you want to do with your day from start to finish. You graduated high school with honors, and you're already on track to begin your pre-med path at university in the fall. You're aware, however, that this is one of the last big trips you'll take before a long journey of education and nights staying up late studying. You certainly don't want to miss out on any of the fun because you know this is a once-in-a-lifetime trip. What was supposed to be a joyful last hurrah like that ended in tragedy for the young woman we're going to tell you about in this episode. Her name led news programs for months after her mysterious disappearance. Nearly 20 years later, the familiar senior portrait of the beautiful and intelligent young woman from Alabama periodically shows up in articles and news programs. That's because her disappearance is still a mystery. She has yet to be found. Her name? Natalee Holloway. This is her story.
Used to think it's in my head, but I'm walking with the dead.
Natalee Ann Holloway was born October 21st, 1986 in Clinton, Mississippi. Her parents, Dave and Beth Holloway, divorced in 1993 when Natalee was about 7 years old. Natalee and her younger brother, Matthew, lived primarily with their mom, Beth. In 2000, 7 years after divorcing Natalee's father, Beth Holloway remarried George Twitty, a successful Alabama businessman known as Jug. Beth moved Natalee and her brother from Clinton, Mississippi to the upscale suburb of Mountain Brook, Alabama. Mountain Brook is located just outside of Birmingham. Natalee was in 8th grade at the time, and she sort of fell into a good group of girlfriends. According to a 2010 article by Glamour, 2 of those girlfriends said they all called each other nicknames. Natalee's was Hootie, or Hootie, as she liked to say in a high-pitched voice on the phone. Beth confirms Natalee's beloved nickname in this clip from an interview with Nightline on ABC News.
They called her Hootie.
There's Hootie.
So Hootie Who Holloway.
Who's our special guest today?
It's Hootie.
Hootie Who Holloway.
My friend. Just, sitting in the back, cruising over to my place.
Natalee was a star student. She was a member of the Mountain Brook High School dance team, and she volunteered with the American Field Service, where she helped exchange students adapt to life in the U.S. She earned a full academic scholarship to the University of Alabama, where she planned to be pre-med, with dreams of becoming a doctor. Natalee also attended church regularly. Her Uncle Paul told the Associated Press just days after her disappearance that Natalee's naive. She hasn't dated a lot. She doesn't party a lot. Natalee's friends say that she had an obsession for The Wizard of Oz and a love for the Southern rock band Lynyrd Skynyrd. During finals week, when most students were studying, Natalee was calling her friends to hang out. Her grade point average was the top of her class, so unlike some of her friends, she didn't have to take finals. Natalee's friend Claire told Glamour that she was, quote, not a rule bender. When she got her first car, a little white Volvo, Claire begged Natalee to let her drive it, and Natalee obliged by letting Claire move it one spot over in the parking lot. Natalee did not take risks. Natalee's friend Mallie told Glamour that they worked at Mallie's mom's organic food store on the weekends. Mallie's mom hired adults with autism at the store, and Natalee was their favorite coworker. She worked alongside them to shuck corn and shell peas together. Her friends said that Natalee and her mom, Beth, were very close. Beth was a speech pathologist who worked with children. Natalee's friends say that passion for helping people is something that they shared. Natalee's friends say that she never had a serious boyfriend. She had a crush on one guy, which they could tell by Natalee's shyness whenever she was around him. But they say she was waiting for a Southern gentleman. They reiterated what Natalee's uncle had said. Natalee was innocent. Adding to this innocence, Natalee had never traveled much aside from driving from Alabama to the Florida Panhandle. So a graduation trip to Aruba was a huge deal to her. Honestly, it was a huge deal to her friends too. They all had painted t-shirts that said Aruba. Natalee and her closest girlfriends graduated from Mountain Brook High School on Tuesday, May 24th, 2005. 2 days later, on Thursday, May 26th, Natalee and more than 100 of her classmates and friends took 2 planes for a celebratory trip to Aruba. The plan was to be in Aruba for 5 days of fun in the Caribbean sun and then return on Monday, May 30th. Again, for glamour, Natalee's friends said that the Aruba Holiday Inn where they stayed was nice. The girls were having a great time. They went snorkeling, and it was exactly what you'd expect out of a graduation trip. Friend Claire told NBC's Dateline that they were outside on the beach all day. Then they would take a nap, get dressed, go eat dinner, and then go to one of the bars. According to teacher and chaperone Bob, the chaperones met with the students every day to check in. The trip's organizer, Jody, said that the chaperones were not there to keep an eye on their every move. They were just there to support and make sure the kids were doing okay. Later on, the police commissioner who led the investigation in 2005 and 2006 said that the Mountain Brook students engaged in, quote, wild partying and a lot of drinking, lots of room switching every night, end quote. He said that the Holiday Inn told them they were not welcome back. 2 of Natalee's classmates who were there confirmed reports stating that Natalee was drinking heavily and partaking in the fun while they were there. One of the popular bars for the younger crowd in Oranjestad, about 15 minutes from the Holiday Inn where Natalee was staying, was Carlos and Charlie's. That's where Natalee went on the last night of their trip. Witnesses who were at Carlos and Charlie's the night of Natalee's disappearance reported a large group singing Sweet Home Alabama on repeat. Some of Natalee's classmates report seeing her last around 1:30 a.m. on Monday, May 30th, the same day as their flight home. She left Carlos and Charlie's with 17-year-old Jorn Vandersloot. Jorn was a Dutch honors student at the National School of Aruba. Later, reports would reveal that he was a frequent gambler at the Holiday Inn casino where Natalee and her fellow graduates were staying. 2 of Jorn's friends were also in the car. Suriname brothers 21-year-old Deepak Kalpo and 18-year-old Satish Kalpo. Unfortunately, we may never know what happened during that car ride from Carlos and Charlie's. We don't know where they went, what happened, or why. All we know is that Natalee never showed up at the airport for her return flight home. True to character, Natalee had everything ready and organized in her hotel room already for the flight home. Her passport, cell phone, and bags packed ready to go were found later in her room. But as we know, she never returned to her room. Natalee's Aunt Maria says Natalee being late was a tip-off, indicating that Natalee was always on time.
As the more than 100 graduates boarded their planes home, news of Natalee's disappearance had already made its way to her parents, Beth Twitty and Dave Holloway, who were already on their way to Aruba.
Natalee's hotel roommate grew concerned after Natalee never made it back to the room. She and a few others told the Aruban police stationed at the hotel that their friend did not come home last night. Police took notes on a clipboard. As for Natalee's mom, Beth, she received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize early in the morning of May 30th, which was Memorial Day here in the U.S. Beth told Dateline, quote, I knew instantly when I received that call that just from Natalee's history and character and just her record, I knew instantly that she'd either been kidnapped or murdered. There was no hesitation. Absolutely none. Absolutely none. End quote. She and Natalee's stepfather, along with close friends and family, flew by private jet to Aruba immediately. As any desperate mother would, Beth did her own investigating. Within 4 hours of landing, she had gotten Jorn Vandersloot's address, given the address to Aruban police, and she was standing outside his home. Back home in Mountain Brook, about 8 students from the trip gathered in Natalee's friend's living room. Beth called the group and they put her on speakerphone. She said, kids, I need more details. Anyone who had seen Jorn Vandersloot in Aruba shouted whatever information they had. Over the phone, they could hear Beth outside Jorn's house, pleading to talk with him face to face. The group in Claire's living room, holding on to hope, screamed over the phone, "Natalie's in the house." Beth said that she had gotten Jorn's name from the night manager at the Holiday Inn, who allegedly recognized him without hesitation on a videotape. Beth and her husband, along with 2 police officers, had gone to Jorn's home to look for Natalee. Jorn denied knowing Natalee, but then finally gave a story that Deepak, again one of the brothers that had been in the car with Natalee, supported. Deepak was also at Jorn's house as Beth and the police stood outside. Jorn's initial story was this. He told police that they drove Natalee to the California lighthouse area of Arashi Beach because she wanted to see sharks. They later dropped her off at the Holiday Inn around 2 a.m. Jorn said that Natalee fell down as she got out of the car but refused his help. He said that as he was driving away, a dark man in a black shirt, similar to what the security guards were wearing, came up to Natalee. Again, that was Jorn's first story of the night's events. He would go on to change it so many times that we'll likely never really know the whole truth. One of the first sources investigators checked was security footage from the Holiday Inn. Reports say nighttime surveillance footage of the hotel lobby did not show any sign of Natalee on the night of her disappearance. Beth, however, questioned whether the cameras were even working that night. The police commissioner in charge of Natalee's case clarified that Natalee didn't have to go through the lobby to get to her room. With that in mind, Beth said in an interview for Dateline that they watched hours of camera footage from outside the entrance of the hotel where Jorn would have dropped Natalee off. But there was never any footage found of that happening. With that, Beth was convinced Jorn made up the story.
Let's pause to explain what Aruba's like if you've never been. It's a small island just north of the coast of Venezuela. It's so small that it would only take about 45 minutes to drive the entire length of the island. Blink and you'd think you're at a beach in Florida with Americanized hotels, such as the Holiday Inn where Natalee was staying and a Marriott. Aruba is a constituent country in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. As such, authorities in both Aruba and the Netherlands actively took part in the investigation of Natalee's disappearance.
Search and rescue efforts for Natalee started immediately. 50 Dutch Marines were called in to do an extensive search of the Aruban shoreline. Volunteers from Aruba and the U.S. also joined the search. The Aruban government gave thousands of civil servants a day off to help with the rescue efforts. 3 Dutch F-16s were specially fitted with infrared image devices to scan the island for freshly dug graves. Despite all these efforts and the government spending more than $3 million, which is 40% of the Aruban police's budget, Natalee was never found. During the initial search, Beth was given housing at the Holiday Inn and ended up in the same room as Natalee. Beth said in an interview that it was too much for her to stay in the same room that her daughter had, so she switched to the nearby Wyndham Hotel, where she stayed in the presidential suite. The massive search for physical evidence led to multiple false leads. One of those included what was initially thought to be a blood sample from the car. Further testing determined it was not blood. Although they didn't know it yet, similar false leads would haunt Natalee's family for years to come. Over the course of the next 3 years, police arrested 10 different people in Natalee's case, but no one was ever charged, mainly due to lack of evidence. The first of these was on June 5, 2005, which was the arrests of 2 former security guards from the nearby Allegra Hotel, Nick and Abraham. The Allegra Hotel was closed for renovation at the time of Natalee's trip. Police arrested them on suspicion of murder and kidnapping. It's unclear exactly why they were arrested, but news outlets reported that Jorn and the Kalpoe brothers may have given statements that led to their arrests. Other reports indicated that the 2 former security guards were known for cruising around hotels to pick up women, with police getting involved in at least one of those prior incidents. The 2 former guards were released over a week later without any formal charges. On June 9, 2005, police arrested Jorn Vandersloot and the 2 Kalpoe brothers on suspicion of kidnapping and murdering Natalee. In Aruba, the law allows investigators to arrest someone based on serious suspicion. Authorities must then increasingly meet an evidential burden in order to continue holding a suspect in custody. The police commissioner in charge said the investigation focused on Jorn and the Kalpoe brothers from the very beginning. He said their investigation included close observation of surveillance, telephone wiretaps, and email monitoring. While the 3 suspects were in custody, they changed their stories again. All 3 stated that Jorn and Natalee were dropped off at the Marriott Hotel beach near the fishermen huts. Jorn said he did not hurt Natalee but left her on the beach. The story changed a 3rd time during the interrogation. This time, Jorn's saying that he was dropped off at home and the Kalpoe brothers drove off with Natalee. The police commissioner discounted this third story, stating, "This story came when Jorn saw the other guys, the Kalpoes, were kind of finger pointing in his direction, and he wanted to screw them also by saying he was dropped off. But that story doesn't check out at all. He just wanted to screw Deepak. They had great arguments about this in front of the judge because their stories didn't match. We believe the second story, that they were dropped off by the Marriott." Authorities released the Kalpoe brothers after nearly a month on Monday, July 4th. Jorn remained in custody for 60 more days until he was released due to lack of evidence. According to Beth's husband at the time, a local gardener came forward with information. He claimed to have seen Jorn trying to hide his face as he drove into the Aruba Racket Club near the Marriott Hotel Beach with the Kalpoe brothers in the early morning hours of May 30th, the day of Natalee's disappearance. Another person, known as the Jogger, claimed to have seen men burying a blonde-haired woman in a landfill in the afternoon of May 30th. Police had already searched this landfill days after Natalee disappeared. After the Jogger's story, the FBI used cadaver dogs to search the landfill 3 more times, but nothing was found. On August 26th, police rearrested the Kalpoe brothers as well as a new 6th suspect, 21-year-old Freddie. This guy was accused of taking photographs of an underage girl and having inappropriate physical contact with that same girl. This incident allegedly happened before Natalee's disappearance, and the police commissioner later said that these arrests were unsuccessful attempts to pressure the Kalpoe brothers into confessing.
Meanwhile, Natalee's family held on to hope that she was still alive somewhere else, and they did everything they could to locate her.
2 months after Natalee's disappearance in late July, Beth announced that the reward for information leading to her daughter's return had been raised from $200,000 to $1 million. Beth told reporters that friends had chipped in to increase the reward amount. Natalee's stepfather, Jug, said that there were rumors that Natalee might be in Venezuela or another country. Meanwhile, forensic teams in the U.S. and Holland tested blonde hair that was found on a piece of duct tape in Aruba in July to see if it matched Natalee's DNA. But the samples were not a match. In January 2006, 8 months after her disappearance, the FBI and Aruban authorities interviewed and re-interviewed some of Natalee's friends and classmates in Alabama. Police continued searching for Natalee's body in sand dunes on the northwest coast of Aruba, as well as areas close to the Marriott Beach. All of these searches came up empty. The police commissioner who initially led the case did an interview with CBS shortly after leaving the case. He said he believed that Natalee died from alcohol or drug poisoning and that someone later hid her body. He indicated that there was evidence that Natalee had possession, not necessarily use, of illicit drugs. Natalee's family disputes this story and they denied she ever even touched drugs. This is when Jorn's story changes again. A few months after his release, Jorn Vandersloot gave several interviews. The most memorable was an interview with Fox News over 3 nights in March 2006, which was about 10 months after Natalee's disappearance. Jorn changed his story for the 4th time. In this new version, he claims that Natalee wanted to have sex with him, but he did not want to because he didn't have a condom. He said that Natalee wanted them to stay on the beach, but that he had to go to school in the morning. Jorn then says that Satish Kalpoe picked him up around 3 a.m. and they left Natalee sitting on the beach. Satish's attorney discounted this story, stating that he had gone to sleep and never returned to drive Jorn home. Jorn follows his side of things up, stating that he was somewhat ashamed to have left a young woman alone on a beach and said he lied at first because he was convinced that Natalee would turn up. A month after Jorn's interviews aired, Aruban authorities arrested a 7th suspect, Jeffrey. They arrested him on suspicion of criminal offenses related to dealing narcotics, which the prosecutor says might have been involved with Natalee's disappearance. Jeffrey was released a few days later. In May 2006, the son of former Aruban politician Guido was arrested on suspicion of helping abduct and kill Natalee. Authorities questioned him for about a week, and then he was released. In late 2006, Beth and Natalee's father, Dave, filed a wrongful death suit against the Kalpoe brothers in LA Superior Court. This suit claimed that Deepak and Satish, quote, intentionally, negligently, and wantonly caused deadly injuries to their daughter. This immediately followed a California suit by the Kalpoe brothers against the famous TV host Dr. Phil. The brothers alleged that a private investigator secretly recorded a conversation with Deepak and aired it on the Dr. Phil show. The lawsuit claimed that the show altered portions of the recording to create false incriminating statements, making it look like the brothers engaged in criminal activity against Natalee. An attorney representing Dr. Phil, the investigator, and CBS all denied that the conversation was secretly recorded. A statement by the show's attorney said that the defendants stood by the integrity of the Dr. Phil show and its editing process. Natalee's parents saw a jury trial and unspecified damages in their wrongful death suit against the Kalpoe brothers. Beth said in a statement, quote, "There's no doubt in my mind that Deepak and Satish played a role in my daughter's death and should be held accountable." A year later, a judge dismissed the suit over a lack of jurisdiction since the case had no connection with California and the courts did not have jurisdiction over the Kalpoe brothers. In November 2007, more than 2 years after Natalee's disappearance, Joran Vandersloot and the Kalpoe brothers were arrested again on suspicion of being involved with manslaughter and causing bodily harm that resulted in Natalee's death. All three were eventually released again due to lack of evidence. Shortly after their releases, the prosecutor finally declared the case closed and that no charges would be filed due to lack of evidence. Deepak Kalpoe's attorney stated in part that unless they find a body, there's no way in hell they can be arrested anymore.
The case wasn't closed for long. About a month after the prosecutor declared the case closed, Aruban authorities cracked it open after a Dutch crime reporter claimed to have solved the case.
This all stems from another story told by Joran Vandersloot. In February 2008, a Dutch reporter named Peter released a special television program. In this program, they aired footage that had been recorded from hidden cameras and microphones inside of a car of a Dutch businessman and ex-convict who had gained Joran's trust. You can see Joran smoking weed and stating that he was with Natalee when she began convulsing, shaking, and became unresponsive. Joran said he tried to revive her but was unsuccessful. He said that he then called a friend who told Joran to go home and that he would come and dispose of the body. That friend who Joran claims to have helped that night discounted his story. He says that he was at school in the Netherlands at that time. Prosecutors tried to arrest Joran again on account of this story, but an appeals court said the tape statements were inconsistent with evidence in the case. Joran met with authorities and denied his statements from the tapes, claiming he was under the influence of marijuana. He stood by his previous story that he left Natalee alone on the beach. You won't believe this, but Joran Vandersloot's story changed again in November 2008. Fox News aired another interview in which Joran said that he allegedly sold Natalee into sexual slavery. He claimed that he was paid money when Natalee was taken and was later paid to keep quiet. The Fox News report also aired audio provided by Joran of his father revealing knowledge of his son's apparent involvement in human trafficking. The audio was later disputed. A Dutch newspaper reported that the father's voice was actually Joran trying to speak in a lower tone. Joran eventually retracted the statements made in that interview.
As we mentioned earlier, Vandersloot's story changed many times over the course of the next 5 years. Each time his story changed, investigators would look into his new claims but wouldn't find anything. At one point in 2010, Vandersloot claimed to have left Natalee's body in a marsh in Aruba. New prosecutors said the locations, names, and times he gave just didn't make sense.
In 2010, Natalee's mom, Beth, came into contact with Joran again. Her lawyer received an offer from Joran requesting an advance of $25,000 against a total of $250,000 in exchange for the location of Natalee's body and the true story of her death. Beth and her lawyer notified the FBI and wired $15,000 to Joran's account. The information Joran gave was again proven to be false. He told Natalee's family that her body was in a house in Aruba, but the house he was talking about had not even been built yet when she disappeared. Joran was then charged with extortion and wire fraud.
That same year in 2010, 5 years to the day since Natalee's disappearance, 21-year-old business student Stephanie Flores Ramirez vanished in Lima, Peru. The lead suspect in the case was a familiar name, Joran Vandersloot.
Police found Stephanie dead 3 days later in a hotel room booked by Joran. Not long after, authorities found Joran in Chile and arrested him on a murder charge. Police in Peru say Joran confessed to killing Stephanie. He says he killed her after he lost his temper because she took his laptop without permission and found information linking him to Natalee. Joran ended up admitting to the extortion plot against Natalee's parents, saying, quote, "I wanted to get back at Natalee's family. Her parents have been making my life tough for 5 years. He also pled guilty to murdering Stephanie and is serving a 28-year prison sentence. Beth, now knowing exactly where to find Jorn, traveled to Peru to visit him with a Dutch documentary crew. This was right after the extortion incident. She walked away from that visit with a new mindset. She said he didn't provide any answers, but it allowed her to move on. She told Dr. Oz in 2017 that she didn't expect to feel empowered when she left Jorn in prison. She said she saw him as a pathetic person and didn't feel any hate. Dave, Natalee's father, said he might go to Peru one day to talk to Jorn, but he wants to give it time for prison to potentially change him. 6 years after Natalee's disappearance and no new evidence, Natalee's dad, Dave, filed a petition with the Alabama courts to have Natalee declared legally dead. Beth intended to oppose the petition, but in 2012, 7 years after Natalee's disappearance, a judge signed the order declaring her dead. It has now been nearly 18 years since Natalee's disappearance. Her mom, dad, and brother have never received closure. Each time a potential human bone is discovered, its DNA is tested to see if it's a match for Natalee, but each time the results come up short. Last year, in 2022, Beth returned to Aruba with television personality and journalist Nancy Grace, who criticized Aruba's initial investigation. Nancy said that Natalee should have been found within 24 hours given the size of the island. Natalee's family criticized the investigation from the very beginning as well. The Aruban investigation has been accused of alleged bribery, cover-ups, and corruption in its handling of Natalee's disappearance. During an interview with Nancy Grace on Inside Edition, Beth said she'd found some solace in her daughter's disappearance.
Natalee was with God, and that her Heavenly Father wrapped His loving arms around her, and He cared for her through whatever ordeal she encountered that night.
As for now, Natalee's mother has made it her mission to advocate for traveling safety. She founded the International Safe Travels Foundation. The nonprofit is designed to educate the public on traveling safely internationally. In 2010, the Natalee Holloway Resource Center opened at the National Museum of Crime and Punishment. It helps families of missing persons. Natalee was a straight-A student with a bright future, but that future was dimmed in an instant. So we ask you to remember her name, repeat it. Just like Beth, we all need to advocate for traveling safely, whether it's internationally or down the street from your home. Life can change in a second. Little things like using the buddy system, sharing your location, carrying your cell phone with you at all times and making sure it's charged, being extra cautious in crowded touristy areas, and being aware of your surroundings might all be able to help. Never let a friend leave alone or with someone you don't know. Tell your friends, your kids, their friends. Remind everyone, you never know whose life you might save. As for Natalee, we can remember her by her 2005 senior yearbook quote. It's from the Lynyrd Skynyrd song Freebird, which is personally one of my favorites of all time. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? For I must be traveling on now. There's too many places I haven't seen.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Murder Diaries Pod. Until then,
stay safe. Bye.
Is your daily grind getting you down? A ThermoSpa's hot tub may be the solution. Just a few minutes under those powerful soothing jets, and all your stress seems to melt away, like you're lying on a cloud of bubbles. You'll not only feel better, but sleep better too. Call 877-861-4672 now, and for a limited time, save $1,250. Call 877-861-4672 or visit thermospas.com to schedule a free on-site assessment.
Seeking the truth never gets old. Introducing June's Journey, the free-to-play mobile game that will immerse you in a thrilling murder mystery. Join June Parker as she uncovers hidden objects and clues to solve her sister's death in a beautifully illustrated world set in the Roaring '20s. With new chapters added every week, the excitement never ends. Download June's Journey now on your Android or iOS device or play on PC through Facebook Games.